Hi there and welcome to this tutorial for Motion Symphony. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at runtime mirroring. Basically this allows us to mirror our pose at runtime to get more coverage in our animations. Say you have a left foot stop animation, well you could mirror it and have a right foot stop animation as well. Now it's up to you whether you use runtime mirroring or not. It's not a compulsory feature. It does however have some benefits for motion matching, especially if you're using uncleaned up motion capture data. If your animation has any bias to the left or the right, the runtime mirroring will eliminate that bias so you have equal amount of bias both ways. So it can be very useful, but it is also a trade-off. So you can either use runtime mirroring, which is going to have a little bit of a performance overhead, nothing too big, or you could duplicate your animations and actually mirror them, and then that's going to have a memory overhead. So it's really a juggle up between runtime and memory performance. Without further ado, let's jump into the project. Oh, and also don't forget to read this documentation here. It should have everything you need if it's not covered in the video. Okay, so I've already got one here. I'm actually just going to delete it. And I'm going to create a new mirroring profile. So we right click in our content browser, choose animation and choose mirroring profile. Now we're going to need one of these profiles for every skeleton in our project that we want to be able to mirror at runtime with Motion Symphony. I'm going to call this tutorial mirror profile, and we can double click on it to open it. First thing we need to do is bind it to a skeleton. In this case, I'm going for the UE4 mannequin skeleton, and that should be easy. All right, so we have this big list down the bottom, which is currently empty, and this is a list of all the mirroring rules for this mirror profile. So for every bone, it's going to have a rule of how to mirror it. Does it mirror to a bone pair, for example, a left and right, or does it mirror upon which axis? Now we can set the defaults for this in this default section. What's the mirror axis? What's the flip axis? A rotational offset, whether we want to mirror the position of the bone. So a lot of the time the bones are connected end on end and the position never changes. And for a human body that can often be the case, and it's all controlled by bone rotations. If it is, we can check this, so uncheck that so that we're not mirroring the position of the bones. If the bones positions do move relative to each other, then you can actually check that. It's a little bit faster if you're not doing that. So the most important thing here is the left and right affix. So for usually in a skeleton, we have left and right affixes. So hand_L or hand_R. It really depends on your skeleton's naming convention. You might have _left and _right like this. Whatever it is, just make sure it's consistent with your skeleton. Otherwise, it's not going to set up these bone pairs correctly. So with all that done, we can save it and right click on our asset and choose Auto Map Bones. You can see now we've filled the array with 42 elements, and these are all either bone pairs or instructions on how to mirror bones. So for example, some bones don't have mirror pairs like the root or the pelvis or any of the spine bones, so they are simply mirrored across an axis. That mirror axis is Y, and we also have a flip axis, which in this case is X. Now, it might take a little bit of experimentation to figure out which axes to use. It really depends on your skeleton. And from my experience, each bone could be different. So unfortunately, there could be quite a lot of work in initially setting up a skeleton for mirroring. However, once you've set it up, you can use it forever for that skeleton. There's a few other settings you can see has mirror bone. In the case of the root bone, it doesn't have a mirror bone, so that's unchecked. The default for mirroring bone position, we don't need to mirror the position, so that's unchecked. And we also have a rotational offset, which for most bones is going to be 0. Again, it completely depends on your skeleton. For the UE4 skeleton, there were a few bones that I had to change from the default. And I'll show you that right now. So I'm just going to go to one that I've already made. And this one is actually available with the example project. So I highly recommend downloading the example project and having a look at this. Yes, there are a lot of bones that, with a lot of settings, but once it's set up again, as I said, it's set up. So in this case, we can see the IK foot is flipping and mirroring on both on the X axis. I'm looking for the thigh here specifically because that bone Okay, so the thigh bone, we have a left and right So you can see it figured out the effects correctly. It actually has a mirror bone. And you'll notice that every bone that does have a mirror bone, the mirror axis and the flip axis is just set to none because it's going to mirror directly off another bone. Has mirror bone will be checked. Now on the UE4 mannequin, I found that with the thighs, I had to put in a rotational offset of 180 on the Z axis. Otherwise, it just wouldn't mirror properly. So you might find some odd bones here and there that you'll have to fix, even after the auto mapping. All the auto mapping is going to do is to detect which mirror bones are actually mirrored and set up the list initially. In the future, there may be future updates that's going to automatically detect everything, but for now, there is a little bit of manual work that you need to do. So once it's set up, it's ready to use in any of our motion matching or pose matching nodes that support mirroring profiles. So there we go. That's the mirroring profile. Now let's have a look at how we can set that up in different nodes. So for motion matching, we actually need to do it in our pre-process because we need to pre-process our poses. So we need to actually have mirrored pose data. So it's really simple. We add in our profile into this mirroring section here. And then we need to go to our animations. And for any animation that we want to generate mirrors for, we check enable mirroring. Now you might have animations where you're holding a gun or a sword and the pose is not mirrorable, if that's a proper word. And in that case, you might not want to mirror that animation. Or if you have a straight running loop that you've cleaned up and it is basically a mirror of itself anyway, you might want to uncheck mirroring. But in my case, I've pretty much mirrored every single one. And this gives me extra coverage and also eliminates any left and right bias. When we hit pre-process, it's going to create poses. It's going to pre-process every animation twice, except the second time it's going to be pre-process the mirrored version of it. And there's going to be mirrored poses. So you can't actually see the mirrored poses. You can't visualize them here, but they're basically going to be, well, they're just going to be whatever the mirror is of this data. So you don't really need to see that. It's all under the hood. So once we have that and we've actually pre-processed with our mirroring profile, it's going to just work at runtime. It's going to automatically pick it. It's going to automatically mirror it. You don't have to do anything else in the animation graph. So let's have a look at a pose matching node just quickly. If I go to this one here, we actually have a pose matching node. Whoops, I've opened the wrong thing. I'm going to animation blueprints and I'll go to pose match test. So here we have a pose matching node for our idle, and I've got in the details panel, there's a mirroring section. We need to check enable mirroring if we want it to mirror, and we have to set the mirroring profile. If we do that, the pose matching node is going to actually have effectively two animations, and it's going to pick whether it needs to do the mirrored one or not the mirrored one. If you have a look at my character here, he's got the right foot forward. Now the mirrored version of that pose is obviously with the left foot forward. Now the cool thing about this is when our character comes to a stop, depending on the cycle of their run animation, they might come to a stop with the left foot forward or the right foot forward. In this case, our pose matching node's going to go, our left foot is forward, I'm going to play the normal version of the animation, or the right foot's forward, I'm going to play the mirrored version of the animation. So it can be really useful in that way with a pose matching node. Now the same thing goes for, so this is another pose matching node that we have mirroring. It's a run start. Let me have a look at a stop. So a stop is going to be a multi-pose matching node, and the concept is exactly the same. We go to our mirroring section, we have enable mirroring and the mirroring profile. However, in this case, I actually have a left and right stop animation, so I've set them here. I could get rid of one of these and then just turn on enable mirroring, and we should be able to get stops with both the left and right foot forward. So the same concept applies to mirroring for all the pose matching nodes. Now there is one caveat that you do need to be aware of. Root motion mirroring is supported for the motion matching node only. So if you're using mirroring with the motion matching node, then the root motion will be mirrored as well and supported. However, with all the pose matching nodes, root motion is not supported for mirroring. So thank you for watching. I hope this gives you an understanding of how to use mirroring profiles to mirror poses in Motion Symphony. I'll see you in the next tutorial.